Okay, I think everybody has their food and are comfortably seated. Just a couple of comments before I introduce our speaker today. I want to assure you the TV cameras are not from 60 Minutes. They belong to my youngest brother and his son, and Jerry owns a radio station in Manhattan and does a lot of videography, I guess is the term and thing. So they're not from 60 Minutes. I just want to caution you just a little tiny bit about the language that you're going to hear. General Patton speaks like General Patton, so just if you're uncomfortable with that language, grin and bear it. George Smith Patton Jr. was born in 1885 on a sprawling ranch and vineyard in what is now San Marino, California. His parents were wealthy from winemaking, business interests, and inherited money. Patton's maternal grandfather was the founder of Los Angeles, developing it from a sleepy Mexican fishing village into a modern city. In fact, Mount Wilson is named after him. The family also was an owner of Santa Catalina Island. The Pattons were a fighting family dating back to the first American Patton, a Scottish immigrant. Pattons fought and died in every war since the nation was founded. As a child, Patton heard the stories of his grandfather and uncles killed in the Civil War, and the great Southern cavalryman John Mosby, known as the Gray Ghost, was a regular house guest. Patton attended VMI for 1 year, then was admitted to West Point, where he flunked his first year and was held back. He then began his long climb to excellence, finishing as the adjutant of cadets. He married his childhood sweetheart, Beatrice Eyre, a wealthy Bostonian, and then began the nomadic career of an Army officer. His tours included the Pancho Villa expedition into Mexico, where he made the only real news of that war by using cars to attack a ranch where he personally killed 2 of Villa's top aides and then slung their bodies over the fenders to present them to General Pershing. He followed Pershing to France in the Great War, World War I, and virtually, single-handedly, created the Tank Corps. In several battles, he won awards for bravery and was critically wounded. As the nation prepared for World War II, Patton created the Armored Corps from nothing and was then assigned to create a national desert training center in anticipation of the African campaign. He was next summoned by General Marshall and given planning responsibility for the great North African invasion. Since that time, he has been killing and capturing more of the enemy. We lost the audio. What happened to it? There we're back. Since that time, he has been killing and capturing more of the enemy and freeing territory more prolifically than any general in the history of the world. Imagine, if you will, as he speaks today, it is fall 1945, and the general is the commander of occupational forces in southern Germany. Retirees, attention! Hut!
Did you not hear the order to come to attention? You're not special. You are not special. Get on your feet. You too. You, what is wrong with you soldiers? On your feet. God damn it, what is wrong with you people? Come to attention. God damn it. When's the last time you shaved? $5 fine. Bad haircut, $5 fine. No tie, $5 fine. This is fucking pathetic. Who's in charge here? Who's in charge of this rabble? You. There's the goddamn problem right there. If a person doesn't know he's in charge, how can he lead?
Yes, sir, you're right.
right, sir.
You think you could grab your balls and call these people to attention?
Yes. Everybody attention. Hut, hut.
You think we're ready to begin now?
Who?
I assume command of this formation.
Thank you very much, sir.
Take seats!
All right.
And there'll be no laughter in my formation! All right. You all know why I'm here. These so-called slapping incidents. The Supreme Allied Commander, Allied Expeditionary Forces General Eisenhower has ordered me to apologize for these incidents. I've done this. I will continue to do it. I will do it today. But before I do, I want you all to hear the entire story. First, 2 years ago, 1943, in August, fighting in Sicily. 30 days of hot, aggressive, frontline combat action, facing hundreds of thousands of Italian troops and some of the very finest Nazi armored divisions. During these days of battle, I began to notice increasing numbers of these so-called battle fatigue cases. Battle fatigue is an excuse for cowardice. I'm determined to eradicate it from my army. After 15 days in Sicily, our frontline infantry regiments had suffered 20, 25, or 30% combat fatalities. You frontline soldiers know what a front is like. 1 man, 5 yards, 1 man, 5 yards, 1 man, 5 yards, and on and on and on for dozens or hundreds of miles. When you have 20% casualties, now it's you and 10 yards. And you face twice as many Germans, and you have twice the risk of being killed. The soldier leaves the front for a good reason, to get ammo, to get food, to get clean socks, to get the mail, to take a wounded comrade back. Now it's you and 15 yards, and you face 3 times the Nazis, and you have 3 times the risk of being killed. And if some cowardly son of a bitch leaves the front for no good reason, throws down their rifle and runs to the rear, that's a 20-yard hole that cannot be filled. And it's a blow to morale to the unit that can't be filled. Because of the need to keep fighting soldiers at the front, I gave written specific orders to all commanders, to all hospital units. Battle fatigue is not an illness, it's not a wound, it's not something to be treated at hospitals in the rear. Battle fatigue is kept at the front. Battle fatigue is handled by a company commander. You give the kid clean socks, some hot chow, a good night's sleep, a hot shower. You give them some mail to deliver, some ammo to pick up. You make them useful, you make them a man again, and you keep them at the front. If these orders had been obeyed, we would not be having this discussion today. Well, on the morning of the first of these incidents, we've been fighting all night. There were a lot of casualties. I always stop at the hospitals. I hate the hospitals. The soldiers killed and wounded and screaming, yelling, the injuries, the waste of manhood. I hate it. But I sent those young men out, and they deserve to see the person that did this to them. As we approached the hospital tent on a slight rise, steam coming off of the ground in the cool morning, we passed a pile of equipment. Helmets clove in, rifles shattered, rucksacks ripped with shrapnel. A little further up is another pile of uniforms, shredded, torn, bloody, covered with feces and urine. Right outside the hospital tent, a pile of body parts, feet, arms, hands, and as we approached, the tent flapped open, the leg came flying out and slid down the pile, and it was still kicking. When you step into a hospital tent, your senses are assaulted. You smell the copper of blood. You smell the stench of bowel and urine. You smell the charred meat of cauterization. You see doctors moving hands, sawing and suturing so quickly you can't see their fingers move. Nurses hustling patients to and fro. The orderlies wheeling people in and out. You see them all standing in an inch of gore, their shoes red with blood. And you hear suture, retraction, doctor, nurse. You hear the sizzle of cauterization. And mostly you hear the screams of the soldiers who are undergoing surgery without the full benefit of anesthesia because there's enough time to save their lives or to deaden their pain, but not enough time for both. What do you say to these people? What do you say? Thank you, doctor. You're sending this young man home to his mother. Thank you. Thank you, nurse, so very much. Your work is appreciated. You're saving lives. And there is nothing more comforting to a young man's soul than a pretty smiling face and a gentle touch. Thank you, you Negro boys. You orderlies are doing a great job. Your people must be proud of you. Thank you for your service. And you step out of the hospital tent to the recovery tent. And you step in the door, and in the first cot, it's a beautiful young man with a big smile on his face, missing a leg, and he said, "Hey, General." And I shook his hand. I told him I was proud of him. I put a medal on him. He said, "I used to play center field. I'll be playing center field again next summer." I said, "By God, son, I bet you will. I bet you will." He said, "Will you come see me play?" I said, "Sonny, you tell me where you are next summer, and I'll be there. By God, I will." And in the next cot, there's a boy with no arm. I pinned the medal on him, told him I was proud of him. He said, "That's my writing arm, General. Will you write a letter home to my mom?" I said, "Just, sure I will." I sat down, and he started to dictate. "Dear Mom, General Patton is writing this letter as I lost my hand. Things are going great. I'm just fine. Things are going great. This is the boy with no arm. Things are going great. What heroes we raise in this country. What men." In the next cot, there's a boy with no face at all. It's like Satan took a spoon and just scooped it off. But he had 2 ears, and he could hear that he was going to live. And this boy knew that for the rest of his life, he would never be kissed by a beautiful girl. For the rest of his life, little children would scream and run away when they saw him coming. I pinned a medal on him, and I told him I was proud of him. And as we were talking, I got a little hitch in my throat, just a little quaver in my voice, and he reached over with his hand, and he patted my hand. Here's a boy with no fucking face, and he's trying to comfort me. What men! What men! And in the next cot, there's a boy with bright blue eyes and no head from his eyebrows up, and his brains falling back on the pillow, and he was dying, and he knew he was dying. And I held his hand, I kissed him on the cheek, I pinned the medal on him, and he started to say something. I listened as close as I could, and I heard him whisper, "Mama, Mama," and he died in my arms. And then at the end of the tent, sitting on the end of a bunk, there's this thing, not a man, not a soldier. There's this coward sitting there, quivering and shaking and crying. And I asked him, "Where are you wounded?" He said, "I'm not wounded, General. It's just my nerves. I just can't take it." Can't take it? My ass! You're nothing but a goddamn coward. You may get shot and you may get killed, but you're going back to the front and you're going to fight. Now get out of here. And he didn't move, and I swatted my gloves across his helmet, and it fell to the floor. The doctors grabbed him and rushed him out. Then a couple of days later, The exact same kind of heroic doctors in a different hospital after the same night of bloody fighting. The same kind of heroic soldiers with the same kind of horrific wounds. The same great attitudes. And at the end of the tent, in the exact same spot, is another coward crying and whimpering. I asked him if he was shot or wounded or hurt. He didn't say anything. And I reached down to grab him. I grabbed him and I said, "You're coming to your feet. You're going to the front." And he swatted at me and hit me. And I took my gloves and I slapped his face. And I pretended to reach for my pistol. I said, "You're nothing but a goddamn coward. You're a deserter. I'll take you out back and shoot you right now." And the doctors grabbed him and they ran him out. Well, hell, I wasn't going to shoot him. As an Army combat commander on the front, it was my obligation and duty and right to take him out back, charge him with desertion, and execute him. And if I'd have done that, nothing would have happened. But because I was kind and pretended to try to scare some manhood into him by touching my pistol, we're going through all this. Well, the doctors wrote a letter and sent it up. The doctors are all pinkos. Sometimes I think they want us to lose this war, mostly Democrats. The letter came to my assistant, General Omar Bradley. He put it in a safe and he forgot about it. Bradley knows the score. You can't win a war coddling deserters. All of the reporters traveling with the 7th Army knew about these incidents. They know you can't win a war coddling deserters. Harsh things have to be done by hard men. They ignored it. But then that son of a bitch, Drew Pearson, busted it open on his radio show and his newspaper column. And all of a sudden, Congress was calling for my impeachment. The Senate wanted an investigation. There was a newspaper cartoon showing me with an Adolf Hitler mustache and hobnail boots kicking a soldier. A goddamn discredited homosexual communist muckraker newsman sabotages the war effort, and I get compared to Adolf Hitler. Well, Ike had to do something. General Marshall even told him I could be fired and sent home if he wished, but Ike knew he needed me for the Normandy invasion. He had plans. Ike ordered me to apologize to the 2 soldiers and the hospitals involved. This I did, and I continue to do today. I've gone further. I have apologized to every unit in the entire 7th Army. I would step in front of entire divisions. Men, I'm here today at the order of General Eisenhower to appall him. Before the word is out of my mouth, a soldier leaped to his feet and said, "No, General, no!" Well, I have orders that I must have. And another soldier leaped to his feet. "No, General, don't apologize, no." And another, and 15,000 soldiers on their feet all shouting, "No, General, no, no, General, no, no, General, no." And I saluted and turned away in a roar of 15,000 voices. You don't think those son of bitch fighting men don't know what battle fatigue is and what desertion is and abandoning your buddy on the front lines is? Well, I believe in full disclosure. I can tell you that that first soldier had been away from the front 3 times, to the hospitals 3 times, without orders or weapons 3 times, and the doctors diagnosed him with battle fatigue. What they did not diagnose him with was dysentery and malaria. Hell, I understand dysentery and malaria. In Mexico, I shivered on a cot for a week, thinking I was dying. In the Great War, I crap blood 10 times a day for 10 days. I understand malaria and dysentery. Son of a bitch, and doctors can't even diagnose a fucking patient. I confess to you today I was wrong to touch that soldier, and I regret it very much. But that second soldier, this is a man whose own tent mates hated his guts. If an artillery piece boomed, he dropped his rifle and ran to the rear. If a bullet whistled, he dropped his rifle and ran to the rear. His own commander had orders against, had charges pressed against him for desertion. That man went on to Italy. He became a sergeant. He became a leader of men. He recovered his manhood. I tell you, I saved his soul. As time went on, letters came in, 20,000 letters. All of them overwhelmingly in support, favoring my actions. The few that were unfavorable were the worst kind of vile and venom, unsigned by cowards afraid to express themselves. And there was one very special letter. It said, "Dear Mrs. Patton," to my wife. "I don't know what my son did to deserve it, but if your husband thought it important, it must have been the right thing to do." What a woman! It's a woman like that, birthed in soldiers like that boy with no leg and that boy with no arm, that won this war. Soldiers like that and women like that, America will never fall. Well, you know the rest of the story. I was removed from command of the 7th Army. I was given planning duties for the Normandy invasion. I was primarily a stalking horse, a ruse to fool the Germans where the Normandy invasion was actually coming. I filled this role very well. And throughout all this time, I prayed on my knees every day. I knew that something so petty and insignificant would not be allowed to interfere with my destiny. I knew that God would give me command of a great army on a great crusade for freedom, and you know that this came true. Now you know the whole story. If you've heard an apology in there, so be it. If you've not heard an apology, well, I guess I could just kiss my ass. Troops, attention! You. These are good soldiers. These soldiers can get the job done. They need leadership. If you step up to the plate, they'll follow you to hell. Take command of this formation. Sir. Carry on.
Cool.
Take your seat.
Hey!
And General, I'm sorry your microphone wasn't working, but I don't know how many times we tested it to make sure it would. Let me introduce Roger Aeschliman to you. He is Vice President and Trust Officer at Core First Bank and Trust with more than $200 million under management. He is very involved in civic affairs, including Rotary, Scouting, and numerous military efforts. He is a colonel in the United States Army Reserve and has, among other honors, been named the Kansas National Guard Officer of the Year. He served combat tours in Iraq and Kosovo and was awarded the Bronze Star. Roger holds undergraduate degrees from Kansas State and a master's degree from the University of Kansas. He and his wife Robin have 2 growing children. Both Roger and the General would be pleased to answer any questions you may have, but please indicate which person you want to answer the questions. Questions?
Over there.
General Patton, what advice would you give a PhD graduating from AIT at one time?
I have no idea what AIT is. Why don't you turn that off? Does that work? All right. Okay.
Hey, you're on.
I have no idea what AIT is. Will you explain that to me?
It's the school they attend after basic training.
Advanced Individual Training. AIT.
They're always coming up with something new all the time,
Oh,
aren't
that's
they?
not new. That's not new, General.
We don't have it in 1945. I don't know what the hell you're talking
not
about.
1945.
All right. Advice to a private? What would the general advice to a private in basic skills training be? Is that what you're asking? General Patton.
Yep. That's right. Good. Do push-ups.
Tell him to kiss his mommy goodbye, cut the apron strings, and work hard and drink some beer.
Hey. All right. We'll drink to that. Hey.
Back there, yes ma'am.
General Patton, would you have let women on the front line?
Women on the front lines. Oh.
All right. This is going to be a General Patton answer. And you are soldiers. All right? It's 1945, Germany, you're soldiers. I love women on the front lines. I get my hands on them as often as I can. Now, son, just between you and me, I have a niece that has followed me around Germany this entire war, and I've been banging her 5 times a week. Other questions? Anyone or comments? Questions for Roger or the General, please. Or comments if someone has. Yes, ma'am.
What advice would you give a senior who's a girl in college? She's interested in joining the military, the Air Force. What advice would you give her?
The General?
No.
No, you want the General to give advice or you want Roger to give her advice? Oh, the world is unlimited, all right? Times have changed. There are, only a fool would say there are not physical differences between men and women. But that doesn't interfere with most success. So, we've seen Army female Rangers make it now, all right? We've seen jet pilots pulling Gs that men can't pull, all right? But on the other hand, can a woman hump 80-pound ammo rounds 5 hours? A few, right? So it's grit your teeth, suck it up, do your job, work hard. The world is yours. The world's what you make of it. Yeah.
General.
Yes, sir.
General, why aren't you in the Pacific killing Japs?
God damn it. I have begged. I begged in Washington, D.C. for a chance to get out of this rat hole, pissant job I'm doing in Germany, to get to the Pacific and kill some of them purple pissing Japs. But I understand very clearly that as vast as the Pacific is, it's not big enough for MacArthur and me. Yes, sir.
General, what's your opinion of Bill Malden, the cartoonist?
God damn it. Bill Malden, the cartoonist, is a great curse on the United States military. He drags soldiers down to the lowest common denominator. I try to make them men, try to have a standard, have some discipline, and he encourages slovenliness, unshavenness. No, I've thrown him out of my army. I won't let him in the 3rd Army territory.
General, what's your opinion of Correspondent Ernie Pyle?
Ernie Pyle's a good man. Not spend much time in my army through any of the engagements. He was in Sicily for a little while. He was in North Africa, but I didn't cross paths with him then. Ernie is a fabulous writer. He captures the American spirit. And if you have not heard, Ernie was just killed on Okinawa last week. A great loss. Anyone else? Questions? Yes, sir.
Roger, as a historian, if Patton would have lived, what do you see happening?
What would have happened to Patton had he lived? In my opinion, he probably would have had a heart attack or a stroke in a year or two, just from the strain of not doing what he loved to do. Patton wrote very clearly in his own diary and elsewhere about telling the truth about the war. He was terribly upset with Eisenhower. Was his long-term buddy, long time. Patton made Eisenhower, and then Eisenhower again helped Patton, and then back again. And despite that, they fell out. Patton completely disagreed with Eisenhower's prosecution of the broad front in Europe. He thought it like Montgomery should be a narrow single thrust, but that Patton should lead the thrust rather than Montgomery. So the egos were too big, and he predicted in 1942, that Eisenhower would be president of the United States. And he threatened in his own writings to expose a lot of people and a lot of foul-ups throughout the war. And had he done that, he probably would have just wound up a very if he didn't stroke out, he would have been a very bitter, angry old man, on the ash heap of history. Had he not died tragically, he'd probably be forgotten like Kruger or all the, I can't even name them all. Lawton Collins and, okay. Sir.
General Patton, what do you think of Montgomery?
What do I think of Monty? Monty. I'll start by being kind and saying Monty is doing for England what he needs to do. The Brits never recovered from their devastating losses in World War I, and then they turned right around and had them again for 5 years of World War II before we got into this war. Britain doesn't have the bodies to die like America has the bodies available to die. As a result, Monty plans and plans and plans in order to reduce his casualty count. It's a logical but incorrect assumption. Monty plans, I fight. I figure if you attack and attack and attack and attack, the enemy doesn't have time to plan to defend. All they can do is run or die. If you plan and plan and plan, the enemy does what? They plan too. Then your plan slams into their plan. So Monty's great plans and great plans and great plans failed and failed and failed. The first example is on the Normandy invasion, Monty swore they would take Caen on D-Day +1. It was D-Day +20. The only thing Monty could take in a day is his shit. And then he'd have to regroup for a week. The other thing that gets at the heart of Monty's personality, at Caen, after the war, this last few months, he's explained he was trying to use Caen as a lure. The Germans would come to him, and he threatened, I will lure them in, and lure them in, and lure them in, and at the right moment, I shall leap out at them like an angry rabbit. Monty was essential to the war effort, but he's not a general to the standard of American armies. Yes, sir?
In your writings, what do you think about the African American soldier?
You mean the Negro? The Negro soldier? Negro soldier. The Negro soldier deserved the chance they got in the war, and they served admirably. I was the only Army commander to ask for the tank battalion, 781st. The only tank battalion of Negroes in the entire Army. And I went to them and I asked if they would serve under me. And I told them, I don't care about the color of your skin, as long as you're willing to kill Nazi sons of bitches, we can get along. And Roger would add, the racism entering World War II was horrific, beyond belief. Eleanor Roosevelt was a primary driver of before Truman was anybody, she was pushing for integration throughout the United States military. A Navy escort destroyer, an all-black ship, a combat division, I forget which one, the 107th, they may know, a full division served in Europe, the famous Tuskegee Airmen, and this one tank battalion. It was a great pivotal moment in history. Sir?
Also the 555th.
Was that the name of the battalion? Which one is?
555th was an airman.
Thank you very much. Good to know. Yes, ma'am.
What and how did you socialize?
Joe Patton.
She asked.
Well, during the war or before the war? There's, between me and you all, you men, it's good to be a general. I have my own caravan. I have my striker to take care of my uniforms and the gear and to feed the dog. I have my own cook. I have my driver. I have my master sergeant. And as a general of some notability, I'm a frequently visited by celebrities who are coming to entertain the troops, some of the USO personnel. And I can tell you that after nice meals with some of these people and cigars and some drinks, and it's a nice long night, and a lot of times some of those ladies find their way to my caravan, and that's okay. General Patton was a heavy drinker, a heavy smoker. He was not afraid to have his way with any woman that would hold still, including his niece. He had a 20-year affair with a niece. And after the war, his wife found out about it. She had known about it, but she ignored it for the war effort and the kids, kind of. And after the funeral, she confronted the niece in New York and cursed her that the great worm would eat her innards for eternity, a Hawaiian curse. And the gal put her head in a gas stove a week later and killed herself. That's it. You show me men that won't fuck, and I'll show you men who won't fight. Okay. Yes, sir.
How did the Army look at the Air Corps and all their bombers and everything?
How did the Army look at the Air Corps? Roger or the General?
The general. Both.
In Africa, we were not getting the air support we needed. The Brits were providing most of the air support. And I called the senior leaders in and had them sit down, and they were explaining to me that it wasn't the lack of air support, it was the lack of fighting spirit among Americans. And at that moment, the Nazis dropped a bomb on my house, and that kind of convinced the Brits that they ought to step up their air support. That's one item. The second, I understand the role of strategic bombing. The Normandy invasion would not have been successful had not bombers for 100 days bombed the crap out of France and Germany, every bridge, every railroad, every way to get reinforcements to the beach got blown up. And Americans were able to get entrenched at the beachhead and fight their way through. The 19th Tactical Air, my close air support, my friend, I love those men. There are people who, on both sides, would argue supremacy of one or the other. I think it's a team effort. The Army's a team. It moves, eats, sleeps, and shits the team, and the Air Force is part of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
General, did you ever shoot anybody with that pistol you're carrying?
Yes, sir. In Mexico, that's not funny. Pancho Villa invaded the United States. He destroyed the town of Columbus. He killed 40 American citizens. We were sent to Mexico to capture and kill and destroy his army. And we chased his people around the country for 100 days. I had intelligence that Mr. Victor Cardenas, his number two, Pancho Villa's number two man, would be found at a ranch. So I took my personally owned cars with me to Mexico, and I loaded up a combat squad, and we drove to the ranch, and I confronted the gangsters, and I personally shot 2 of those bean-eating sons of bitches. We slung their bodies over the fender of my car, and we drove to General Pershing and showed our success, and that turned out to be great news in the pages of the New York Times. I was a celebrity for a little while. Yes, sir.
General, can the Russians be trusted as allies?
Goddamn Russians, no. The Russians cannot be trusted. We're fighting the wrong war now. This war of the peace with the Germans. We need to be fighting the war against the Russians. I right now have on this side of the road 18 battalions of German ready to fight troops, On that side of the road, I have 18 battalions of German equipment ready to go, and I've got a whole fucking United States Army right here 2 miles from the Russians, and if you say boo, I can be there in 5 days in Moscow, and it'll look like it was the Russians' fault. Other questions? Yes, sir.
General, tell us about your dog.
My dog's a wonderful. William the Conqueror is his name. Shortly after these slapping incidents, and I was banished to London to plan the Normandy invasion, in the absence of certain feminine comforts, I thought I could use some animal companionship. I went to the pound and found the ugliest, mangiest mutt there, a bull terrier, and I named him William the Conqueror. And he was a wonderful dog, and the first time a shell landed nearby in Europe, he cowered between my legs, and from that point on, he was called Willie. There's a very poignant picture. Willie stayed with Patton the entire European tour. He survived Patton's death, and there's a very poignant picture you can see of Willie on the general's duffel bags and gear ready to be shipped back to the United States. He survived for a year or two back in the United States. Other questions, anyone, or comments? Yes, sir.
General, could I offer you a piece of advice? For the rest of your tour in Germany, please stay out of sedans.
For anyone that doesn't know the reference, General Patton failed miserably as the governor of Bavaria. It was not in his nature to be a civilian administrator. All right, he was relieved of command, and he was given command of the 12th Army, which was 25 PhD historians who wound up writing that 3-foot-long bookshelf of the history of World War II. You've probably seen the big green volumes, right? That was his command. So for the last 4 months of his life, he didn't do anything except drive to other countries, get medals and sashes, and get presidents and kings and princes and queens gave him awards and honors and dinners and dances. And he hunted and fished as much as he wished to. And he was on his way one morning in December to go hunting with his good friend Hap Gay when an army truck pulled in front of them on a highway, and his driver of the sedan could not stop in time, and Patton was slammed forward into the crossbeam of the sedan and broke his neck and was paralyzed for about a week. He was just starting to get some feeling back into his hands and feet. He was starting to get some motion when he had a pulmonary embolism and died. So stay out of sedans, or drive yourself, I guess. I drive a 97 Toyota Tacoma pickup. So. Anyone else, anything?
General.
Yes, sir.
Sir, what is your response to the airborne about them not needing your help at Bastogne?
I love the airborne, 101st fighting sons of bitches, and I understand their ego, and I appreciate it, but they're wrong. They were starving, they were out of ammo, they were dying rapidly, they were out of medical supplies, and there's no other army in the world but the Third Army that could go from attacking east with a full army to turning north and attacking north and going from that attack to that attack and hitting there in 5 days with 5 divisions. No other army in the world could do it, and the 101st Airborne would not have held out for 5 more days. They're great soldiers. They fought heroically throughout this entire war, but they didn't actually win it all by themselves. Yep. One more or done? Yes, sir.
Sorry, General.
All right.
Yeah. As we said, Bastogne.
Oh, where's the sergeant major? Somebody take that man out of here. I'll be glad to stick around and chat some more if anybody wants to say hi, but I think we're wrapping it up.
Ladies and gentlemen, General Patton, Roger Aeschliman.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Never thought I'd get to say this, but General Patton, on behalf of the Fort Riley Retiree Council, I'd like to present you with a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you.
What did you think about the Big Red 1 Division?
The big red one, I wish I could have kept with me all the time.
Cool.
All the time.
This is a commemorative pewter ornament for Christmas tree. And
Hey,
it
thank you
commemorates
so
the
very
100th
much.
anniversary next year of the big red one.
I will hang it on my Christmas tree this December 1945 and every year thereafter. Thank you. Thank you, Kay.